Welcome to the Sfl Crunch Time pre-show. The Sfl Honors Ballot is out. Now let's get to the guys that we think should have been on that ballot but didn't quite make it. Ethan, let's walk through this thing step by step and point out some of the players that should have been on the ballot this year. What do you think?
All right, so as we're looking at the list of most valuable players, we had Tom Pepper with Vancouver, we had Jack Wigmore with Baltimore, Bullet Beletsky with Florida, Josh Rowe with Houston, and Otis Boudreau of Louisiana, just doing a phenomenal job in kicking. Okay, of those five, they're all very solid picks. Who there do you think would be number 6?
If I thought there'd be number 6, and I think Kevin Say probably could do a little better than 6th overall. This guy had nearly 2,000 all-purpose yards over the course of the season, 20 all-purpose touchdowns, and he led his team to a 7-5 record. They got a home playoff game, and he's a huge reason that they came out of the gate as fast as they did. And this is a guy we were talking about every week for the first half of the season. He's a great player on a team full of very good players. I think he is one of the 5 best players in the SFL. There's not saying I would take a guy off this list. I think Josh Rowe had a great season. Otis Boudreau, vital to the success in Louisiana. But Kevin Say's got to be on this list, man.
I can see the point in that for Kevin Say. I think Charlie definitely has a bit of a higher up there on yards per carry. I think another one might be Ezekiel Love. He did a pretty good job there too with his offensive runs, and also Liam Hammer was probably a good indicator there as just being one of the best receivers. I think he was a pretty valuable case. I know San Diego didn't have a great time, but I think he would definitely be on that list. Let's go to Offensive Player of the Year. Once again, we have Tom Pepper, Jack Wigmore, and Charlie Beletsky. San Diego's Liam Hammer also on that list, first place in yards, touchdowns, and in yards per reception. And there was only 4 put up on this list. Is there a player here that you find offensive that was not an Offensive Player of the Year?
Well, I don't know if I'm offended, Ethan, but I think if Liam Hammer's on that list, you got to put Gunnar Lewis on there too. You mentioned San Diego. They didn't have the wins and losses that they would have liked, but they put on a show for most of the SFL season. A lot of deep passes, a lot of touchdowns, embarrassed a lot of good defenses over the course of season 18. If you got Liam Hammer in there, you got to have Gunnar Lewis as well. Those two are yin and yang in terms of how they played off of each other, and you could not have had one successful season without the other in Hammer and Lewis. But another guy I want to see up there is Johnny Pickler. Johnny Pickler is offense personified in the SFL. It was almost 90% of his team's yardage through his passing. 4,500 yards, 32 pass touchdowns. That was 3rd best in the SFL. Now, look, that's not number 1, but that team is built around him. Vin Calia, Mike St. Green, Tiberius Bovine, they're all counting on Pickler to get him the ball. And Robert Merrill, who probably would be a backup on some teams. That's nothing against Merrill, and I think he had a tremendous second half of the season. But I think that this offense revolves around Pickler, and in a lot of ways, the league revolves around Pickler's offense as well.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right in that. And I think another case could be made again for Ezekiel Love, who had the highest amount of rushing yards in the SFL, over 1,700. He had himself a pretty good run. He could have easily been a candidate. And I agree with you with Johnny Pickler. I think he was a good choice as well. Let's go from offense. Let's go to defense. Defensive Player of the Year. We have Josh Rowe, who set the interception for touchdowns record. We have Clint Hendershot at linebacker, Jaden Swift at defensive tackle, who was first place in tackles for loss. Then you also had Emmanuel Blackman, who just had an absolute phenomenal season. All 4 of these people are definitely good candidates for there. Is there one, who should be in that contention list as well?
Well, I think somebody from Louisiana needs to be on this list. Louisiana had an outstanding defense. Mike Ryan, who had that huge interception streak, Tank Bennett as well. Those two combined for 20 picks. Bennett had 110 tackles all by himself. This defense allowed fewer than 20 points a game. They're the only unit in the SFL that did that. Nobody from Sioux Falls on this list. It's just remarkable to me. And he got some good players on teams that didn't do so well. Rochelle Colston, I think, is probably the best free safety in the league. She had 11 picks, and she nearly had 100 tackles, a big hitter, and she's the centerpiece of that defense in Los Angeles. And Max Jackson had a great season as well, also over 100 tackles, only 7 picks, but 11 passes deflected. And I know you want to use objective criteria to build out these lists, but at some point you've got to make allowances for how these players are impacting not only their defenses, but opposing offenses. The entire Federal Bureau of Interceptions was left off this list. I think that's a travesty. Rochelle Colston deserved to be on that list, and I think Max Jackson did as well.
And you have very good points on that. I would agree with Rochelle Colston being a good choice to add to that list. I would also add Chris Stock to that list, who had 18 deflections on the season. Jack Brown had a pretty good season too, 17 deflections, 8 tackles for loss. Did a great job batting down balls in the air. I think those are 2 players to definitely be in consideration. And I have to agree with you. Yeah, anybody on that Louisiana defense, it's a scary defense. Them and Sioux Falls both had fantastic defenses this season, and they absolutely should have been in that list. All right. Let's go to Offensive Rookie of the Year. We had 4 choices on the ballot. We had Scar Patterson of San Diego. We had Brad Jones. We had Shane Kaufman, another great wide receiver. And then Sioux Falls G.P. Wells, who had led the league in receptions and receiving yards. It just was a great running back through the air. Is there? I'm seeing one that definitely should be on here, and I think we all know who their name is. I think their name is Doug Brown.
Yeah, Douglas Brown, just a remarkable first overall pick in the draft. This is a player that everybody wanted. Tulsa was a team that actually wound up with him, and what a player it turned out to be. A 5-win swing. This is a team that finished dead last in the league last year, and this year they made the playoffs. 1,400 yards, all-purpose, 10 touchdowns. He had fewer yards per carry than Wells and Jones, but he had more carries. He's a bigger piece of this offense, and as teams adjusted to him in the second half, that opened things up for the passing game, and JQ had a tremendous second half as well. That was the impact that he had. Israel Adams in Portland, I thought, had a tremendous season, all things considered. 58 catches, 720 yards. This team only had 17 passing touchdowns all season. Israel Adams had 5 of those. And then Johnny Reno at Fort Worth. I will bang the drum for Johnny Reno here and now. 20 touchdowns to 17 interceptions. How many veteran quarterbacks finish underwater in this league in touchdown to interception ratio? Johnny Reno bucked the trend, and Fort Worth had a strong finish also. There's some great picks here, and honestly, I don't know if I'd go with Scar Patterson or G.P. Wells. G.P. Wells' team had a better season, obviously, but there are some good names on this list, but I would have liked to see a few more.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in agreement. Doug Brown was kind of the one that kind of got left hanging off the ballot. Just had a fantastic season, as you said. Only had more carries to G.P. Wells had 4.9 yards a carry, while he ended up with 4.2. I think you're absolutely right. He should have at least been at least in consideration. Might not have made the top 3, but at least would have been a contender for that spot. For Defensive Rookie of the Year, we only had 3 choices on this one. All right, it was Robert Cherry, defensive tackle. We had Forrest Dalton, a defensive tackle, and then King Rashid at cornerback. Now, with only 3 choices, this leaves a lot of possibilities available for who you would have filled out for a top 5. I'm sure you've got a couple of those in mind.
Yeah, I would. But first, let me say I think Robert Cherry, with his 8.5 sacks over the course of a very good rookie season for Charleston, I think he's won that award. I think he deserves that award. But the competition's a little stiffer than this. In D.C., you had 2 very good linebackers in Declan O'Rourke and Aaron Gooden, guys that, especially in the linebacker spot, they're not going to rack up a lot of stats. But O'Rourke had 11 passes deflected. He finished with a pick and had a lot of balanced play defending the run and pass very well. Aaron Gooden, same deal, 73 tackles. These are guys that are not going to jump off the stat sheet. It's got to be something that you're noticing with this team week in and week out. I think they both had great seasons, and probably they were so good that one may have canceled the other out. Sort of a similar situation with Liam Hammer and Governor Lewis. Adrian Blaine for Florida, I thought had a terrific season. 76 tackles, 4 interceptions, and played some great defense against the run. Now, that's a very talented unit as well, and you could say Adrian Blaine had a much easier job fitting in. I'm not sure I could argue with that. And then you have Stuart Zomelia, who played terrific, 83 tackles, 7 picks, 2 TFLs. Zomelia is a guy who should have been on the ballot. He's got the stats. He's got the performance. He's got good tape. There's a lot to be disliking about this Defensive Rookie of the Year list, and I think any one of those guys I just mentioned would have helped fill that out.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I would be in agreement with you on Stuart Zomelia, who had a great day, great season. Adrian Blaine did a good job getting tackles, get a couple of picks. And said doing solid some solid run defense on that. It's good. It's a good pick there. I think it would have to go. I think from those people, I'd probably pick either Aaron Gooden or Stuart Zomelia. Those would probably be my two to put on there. And that is all of the people we thought should have been on the ballot, but alas, they are not, and we will never know what could have.
Welcome back to SFL Crunch Time with Ethan Muslin. I'm Josh Zirkle. A whole lot to get to today. We're going to review the Sfl Honors Ballot, which came out a couple days ago. Justin Reside, the Las Vegas GM, is going to fill his out in front of us in real time. Tyler Falk is going to stop by. He's going to discuss some SFL and SFL Minor League with us, I think, as well. But first, let's recap the quarterfinal round as we go around the league. The Desperados did not lose a game in the month of April. The Vancouver has lost in their own building all season. JQ, that's one of his 3 interceptions. Mark Lopez, Dean Maddox, and Ashley Rose Finch all came up with takeaways for the Vancouver secondary. Meanwhile, on the offensive side for Tulsa, Douglas Brown was stymied, only 29 rushing yards on 19 carries. JQ, 3 picks in all. Meanwhile, on the offensive side for Vancouver, Robert Redford, 68 yards on the ground, 13 yards, but a touchdown through the air. Tom Pepper, Captain Canada, magnificent as usual. 294 yards, 3 passing touchdowns against only 2 picks. And Gerald Giudice right there, coming up with the game-clinching sack. Vancouver advances to the semifinal, 24-10, your final.
Over at Sports Gamers Online Stadium, it was all Baltimore all the time. Fantastic job from the Vultures, both on offense and defense. Jack Wigmore going over 75% on completions for 285 yards, 3 touchdowns. Only had 1 pick to his name. Johnny Pickler had himself not the best time. He had himself an interception. Well, interception plus 5. Let's call it what it is. Six interceptions on the day for Johnny Pickler. 2 of them going back for pick sixes. One of them from Alvin Mack. The other one you see right here, this is from Marvin Haynes. He would take that all the way back for a score. It was not a good day to be a Knight, but a good day to be a Vulture. Baltimore takes this one down, 43-14.
Sioux Falls at Lone Star, the 4-5 matchup. Big game here for the Lone Star offense. That interception notwithstanding. Terrell Davis and Nathan Barnett both had picks for the yellow and black. But the offense for Lone Star would carry the day. Ike McBride would have 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 by air. And it was Julian Tyree who was intercepted 4 different times by 4 different Lone Star players, including Mickey McGuire, Evan Lacey, and Bo Martin Jr. As you see McBride finding the end zone there. Meanwhile, G.P. Wells on the offensive side averaged just over 3 yards a touch, held to 45 yards rushing on 19 carries. Tyree, with his struggles, could not overcome the might of Lone Star. They move on to the semifinal round, 34-21.
Down on the Bayou, Louisiana had themselves a pretty nice day on the ground. Randy Squarebush, Colin Hart, and Cameron Collier combining for 174 rushing yards. Tank Bennett had himself a nice day. This pick six, taking it back to the house. A beautiful job on defense. One of 2 interceptions on Kentez Johnson. Tommy Utah didn't get picked once, so a great job by Tommy Utah for the day. Here's the thing, Tommy Utah only threw the ball 19 times. It was one of them, and it was one of 12 catches to B. Rabeau, who got the one passing touchdown of the day. It was all Louisiana on the ground, almost nearly putting up an equal amount of passing yards as Kentez Johnson. Just a fantastic job on both ends of the ball for Louisiana, making themselves known for the semifinals. They beat Charleston 45-27.
And so, Ethan, it comes down to this. Lone Star facing Vancouver at home. Again, Vancouver has not lost in their building all season long. If Vancouver wins, they will host the SFL Championship against the winner of Louisiana at Baltimore, happening at Sports Gamers Online Stadium. It's a Saturday playoff doubleheader on Next Level Sports starting this weekend at 2:30 Eastern.
Yep.
All right, joining us once again, SFL Crunch Time contributor, and oh, by the way, the general manager of the Las Vegas Fury, Justin Reside. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
We had some laughs last week when you made your play-by-play debut in SFLM. I got to ask you about that. How did it feel to get that first play-by-play effort under your belt?
Yeah, felt good, better than I guess you call it the rookie season 4. Rookie season play-by-play, and get the first one out of the way of season 5, and hopefully get more in the coming weeks ahead.
No, I kind of go back and forth on this. Do you think one is easier than the other? I think play-by-play and color commentary, they each have their own challenges in different ways for different reasons. I don't know if one is really easier than the other. What do you think?
Yeah, I think play-by-play is easier because you don't have to, because us broadcasters, we have that broadcast research sheet, and you don't have to use that for play-by-play. But when you're an analyst, you always have to use the broadcast research sheet because that is where you have to take your notes and put in the game channel every week, and that's just a whole. When I get into that, when I wasn't doing the calls in the big leagues and doing every game, I'm like, oh, where's it? Then where's the research sheet? Where do I got to find this? Got to find that. That's just a whole different animal than play-by-play.
And you're frantic.
Yeah.
I say that, if you were better at color commentary if you could spin yarn out of your ass. And I think some people have a gift for that. And I think some people are just more in tune to talk about what's happening right in front of them. And you might fit in that latter basket. I thought you did a great job. A little rough in the beginning, just to be honest, but I thought you did a great job. What I want to do now, Justin, I want to walk through the Sfl Honors Ballot, which has come out just a few days ago. I want you to fill out your ballot with us in real time. I'll read off the finalists, and you tell me who you like. Let's start with most valuable player. Tom Pepper, Vancouver. Jack Wigmore, Baltimore. Obvious choices. I would put Charlie Boletsky for Florida right in there as well. Josh Rowe, an interesting case. First in interceptions. And then Otis Boudreau in Louisiana. And we could talk about Boudreau in a minute, but just out of those 5, who's getting your vote?
Tom Pepper, obviously, because Vancouver, number one, he gave Vancouver that number 1 seed, and you have weapons to throw to. That's a MVP in my book.
All right, Otis Boudreau, the kicker, 35 field goal. I mean, he had a ton of field goals. Really bailed out Louisiana at some rough spots. Obviously, his opus is that 15-0 game against Charleston. Really a thrilling game, even though there was not a lot of point scoring to speak of. Are there 5 players more deserving of MVP than Otis Boudreau?
Yeah, if you call out the pundits that say, hey, let's, Boudreau deserves the MVP, MVP of the season. He deserves it. If somebody beats him out, that's fine. But if all the pundits give it to Boudreau, give it to him. That's all.
Stick around. We just started breaking this wedge. More crunch time coming up right after this. Welcome back to Crunch Time. We are rejoined by Justin Reside, who's filling out his SFL Honors bracket. Let's go to Offensive Player of the Year. And you picked Tom Pepper for MVP, so you can't pick him here. Jack Wigmore, Charlie Boletsky, and Liam Hammer, part of the air show at San Diego. Him and Gunnar Lewis, along with rookie quarterback Scar Patterson. Tremendous on offense. Did not have the success in the second half of the season that obviously they would have liked. But for Offensive Player of the Year, who do you like here?
Jack Wigmore. That Baltimore offense is just a weapons bahum when you look at Baltimore as a whole. Because Jack Wigmore has many weapons to throw, and if you saw the quarterfinal last week, he didn't have Ivory, so he had Matt Chima there to bail him out. So
let's go to Defensive Player of the Year. Now, Josh Rowe, again, back on this list. First in interceptions. Had 4 pick sixes, or 1 pick 24, I guess, however you want to shake that. Clint Hendershot in Carolina. Jaden Swift, the defensive tackle. And then Manuel Blackman for London. Who do you like out of that group?
I definitely like, obviously, the one that stands out to me, Josh Rowe from Houston. Those pick sixes were just, even though it was a losing, 5-6 season for Houston, Josh Rowe carried that team through the whole season with his interceptions.
One of the most interesting things to me was that Houston got so much better at the end of the year. I mean, Brad Jones was a part of that, but also Dave Burr, Josh Rowe, that entire defense got a lot stronger as the season went on. Let's move on to Offensive Rookie of the Year. Scar Patterson at quarterback, Brad Jones, talking about Houston guys, Shane Kaufman in St. Louis, now SFL Michigan, and GP Wells at Sioux Falls. Who do you like out of that group?
GP Wells, hands down.
Hands down. Hands down. That's pretty assertive.
It's GP Wells is just too good as a running back. I don't want to see Sioux Falls let him go. He's been Mr. Carries all day for Sioux Falls. Don't let this guy go, Sioux Falls. Don't let him go.
No, he really has been fantastic. Not only just running the ball, but catching it through the air also. Defensive Rookie of the Year, obviously we at Crunch Time have a little bias on this one. Robert Cherry, defensive tackle. Tremendous amount of sackage, both on the stat sheet and in the locker room, if you will. Forrest Dalton and King Rashid. Who you like out of this group?
Yeah, I definitely like King Rashid. That he and an improved Tulsa team, which we'll talk about later, he is my defensive Rookie of the Year right there.
That's a surprise, but it's a good choice and a little bit of a surprise. Special Teams Player of the Year, and I don't think this is a lock either. Otis Boudreaux, who we've talked about already, Doug Britton, your boy, and then Leo Morris for Portland, who I thought had an outstanding second half of his season, and then JT Delaney, certainly deserving to be on this list. Who do you like for Special Teams Player of the Year, Justin?
Doug Britton, I'm sorry. Vegas, he represented Vegas well, baby. Running punts for touchdowns, I'm sorry. That's my guy, and he's my pick for that award.
No apology necessary. I think he had an outstanding special team season. Pretty good offensive season, too, if we're being quite honest. Moment of the season. Now, this is a lot more subjective, but give me your take on this. Atlanta at Vegas in Week 7. Vegas blocks a punt, runs it back over 50 yards. San Diego at Houston, Josh Rowe set his record, the 4th pick 6. Jacksonville at Carolina, Logan Jack in his final game in a Skyhawks uniform just went wild. And then Tulsa at DC, the wild card game. Kevin Say, just looking for somebody to blast on a play where he would eventually score a touchdown. Moment of the season, Justin.
Me, Vegas, Atlanta. For me, it's with that DC Tulsa game a close second.
Okay.
A very close second.
Very close second. Fair enough. Game of the season. Fort Worth at Queen City. Maybe we won't talk about that one too much. Charleston at Florida. Charleston scores 17 points in the final 2 minutes to upset the Storm. Fort Worth and San Diego. And that's Scar Patterson and Johnny Reno lighting it up. Fort Worth completing a comeback in overtime. We're happy to talk about that one. Houston and Mexico City. Gerard Brody's pick six, sealing the game for the Aztecs. Game of the season, Justin.
I got to say, it's Houston, Mexico City. That call, my Mike Torello at the end, that just made me go, what the heck is this play? I'll take Houston, Mexico City for that one.
Fair enough. Most improved team. Tulsa went from 2-10 to getting their first playoff game in team history. Sioux Falls, a big 4-win swing to 7-5, and they won their division. And DC made the playoffs at 7-5 as well, hosting a playoff game for the first time in their history. Who do you like for most improved?
I gotta say Tulsa, because everybody's saying Tulsa. It's like everybody's saying Tulsa. It's like nobody in the world is like going, the other two teams, they're all going, you're all saying Tulsa. They're all saying Tulsa Desperados. That's all they're saying. That's all that they're talking about.
Yeah, Tulsa just fantastic and really continuing to climb with some new acquisitions the offseason as well. Unit of the season, the Sioux Falls secondary, they had 40 interceptions. I think it was 40 by themselves. They would have had the most takeaways by themselves. Forget about the rest of their defense. Just that group by themselves would have led the league in takeaways. Obviously, the Sioux Falls defense as a group set the record. Louisiana backfield, first in league history, 3 players averaging more than 4 yards a carry. The Jacksonville offensive line, only 9 sacks over the course of the year. A tremendous, tremendous effort. Unit of the season, Justin.
It's got to be Sioux Falls, because that unit there made history. You're right, history. That's my vote. That's it right there.
Fair enough. That is the Sfl Honors Ballot with Justin Reside. Justin, anything else you want to talk about? What we got you on the line?
Really, it's just I can't say anything about the Vegas offseason right now. We're in like a whole bunch of trying to see where the pieces fall. We're just waiting for after SFL championship game to see where everybody goes and stuff for now.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with the offseason, and obviously looking forward to seeing you at the SFL convention in your hometown, your de facto hometown. I hope you bring that big fella on the bed there with you. Might have to buy him his own seat on the plane, but that's okay. Justin Reside, Las Vegas Fury. Thank you, Justin.
Yep, thank you.
Quick SFL news drop. The Houston Hyenas have officially rebranded as the Houston Headhunters. Damon Simeon, Houston owner, and new co-owner Mike St. Green debuted the new marks on the SFL Discord server late Tuesday night. The rebranding will be in effect when the team begins play in Season 19. Coming up, interviews with SFL insider Ross Napoli and Tyler Falk. More crunch time coming your way after this.
I'm going to refer to a couple of players, one of which being a tailback in Louisiana, Randy Squarebush, who this past weekend only got a handful of carries. But he is the highest rated player in the minor leagues. He's the highest paid player in the minor leagues. Randy Squarebush terrorizes minor league and a couple of pro backfields, defensive backfields. My biggest question is if that player, he's a cheat code, overpowered player for a majority of minor league defenses. A lot of these defensive players are brand spanking new to the league. They have little to no resistance against him.
That was Tyler Falk on his show Netma talking about the SFLM. We'll get to that in a minute. Tyler, whose player Mike Ryan, as you know, because you are Tyler Falk, Nowhere to be found on the SFL Honors Ballot. I thought you'd be on there at least once, or maybe a teammate of yours, Tank Bennett, or even Rolliman Hood. Nowhere to be found, Tyler. How did you feel about that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's disappointing. It's just that our group together, like you said, Tank, Mike Ryan, even Arthur, our entire group, I think, works so well together that for me to even be put up above any of those guys, for Mike to be put up against any of those guys, and to be on the ballot instead of those guys, I think does them a disservice rather than it does me a disservice. So, I'm a little disappointed that Mike wasn't on there, but like I said, Louisiana is all about the team. We're not just offense or defense, not just one player. We all want to win a championship together. That's the only thing that matters to all of us in Houma, Louisiana, is winning a championship at the end of this season, not necessarily the accolades.
It's a very high road of you to have that, and I don't disagree. I think honestly, being a part of such a strong defense might have hurt your cause a little bit in that sense. But I appreciate you said your piece. Let me move on to what we just heard about the SFLM. Obviously, Randy Squarebush is like the 21-year-old. What is it, Reggie Jefferson in Fast Times at Ridgemont High? A gigantic human being just playing against literally underdeveloped players. I'm not sure anybody would disagree with you that there needs to be some sort of curtailing of talent that is already established in the big leagues coming back and playing in the minors. But I'm really curious, Tyler, what inspired you to go on, as we're taping here on Tuesday, to go on your show on Tuesday and be so outspoken about it? What inspired that?
Well, this is actually a double show, if it helps out. I originally made this point when the whole 2 contract situation was announced at the beginning of the regular season for the pros. I had said that we're going to probably see Randy Squarebush get back into the minor league because he is a second string tailback, and he's going to get about the same or even more reps in Annapolis and completely run over left, right, and center over all these underdeveloped rookies that are just starting out, wanting to make a name for themselves and for them to shine. It also, a name I didn't bring up on the show is Forrest Dalton. He's on the ballot. We were talking about maybe Mike Ryan, but Forrest Dalton's on the ballot for Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, and he's in the minor league on Lexington. He's back at his defensive tackle spot. Yes, he's a DT2 for Jacksonville, but he's a DT1 for Lexington, and he's an absolute monster. Yes, he's a silver player, but it only goes to show you what a player can do at that level, because he is that finite and that dynamic of a defender, that tenacious, that ability, the raw power that he possesses to disrupt offensive game plans, not just in the pros, but even more so now in the minor league. And yes, the 2-way contract system is fine and dandy for me for the right players. I think if we give players like Squarebush and Dalton and maybe Zachary Patton, who, again, all fantastic players, all players who get good playing time, get starting playing time, or in the case of Squarebush, gets some time next to Colin Hart and Cam Collier in Louisiana. But it really needs to be more fine-tuned in a way that says, you know what, your player might not be at a pro level yet, but you can still play in the minor league and still develop your player to get to that position, rather than taking away a spot from a potential rookie that could change the face of the league as we know it.
And I think the solution you proposed was, if you are silver or gold and you have been drafted, then the minors should be off limits to you. Is that about right? Is that about where your position is?
Yes, that's exactly where I went. And kind of like Trellis Blanton, I gave the example of a quarterback for Albuquerque. He is a gold quarterback. I am perfectly fine with him sticking around in the minors because he has not been drafted. That's my only stipulation. I think it's a pretty fair compromise, in my opinion. I just have, of course, no say because I'm not an owner. I'm not allowed in those chats and available to make those decisions. I think, because I've heard it from a couple of minor leaguers. I've heard this argument now during the course of these couple of weeks that the minor league has gotten back into the swing of things, that Squarebush is a little overpowered. There are certain players that maybe just because of their talent and their capacity to perform in a large scale over current rookies in the minor league, that it creates an unfair advantage for not just the player, but for the teams that have them.
I'll give you an argument. You know, and I say this as a two-way player myself and a guy who sat behind Jason Williams in Fort Worth. Squarebush came out and he only had half a job. And I think the incentive of the rule was that you do not have to give up your spot in the minors if you will come and you help out the big league teams filling out their rosters. And I would suggest, I would not insist, but I would suggest that with 4 brand new teams coming in, you're in a situation now where you're going to need even more folks to come in. Now, there's going to be more playing time around because the number of jobs is being spread out. But I think in this situation last year, I think there are some good opportunities for it. Forrest Dalton, you know, that's a situation where, you know, he's just going to maul everybody. And I worry more about not so much the competition because it's the minor league. I don't think the competition is that significant as developing your own player. But I worry about guys that might be waiting in line behind Forrest Dalton, behind Randy Squarebush, that are looking for their opportunity and for those specific reasons aren't getting it. But we can agree to disagree, Tyler. I got to ask you, your team is still in this thing. You're looking forward to Baltimore. Your defense is going against one of the highest rated offenses, not just this year, but in Sfl history. They're first in scoring offense this year. They were first last year. They've been in the top 5 in 4 of the last 5 years. This is a historically successful offense. Is Louisiana up to the challenge?
This is easily, Josh, the most difficult challenge that any team in the past 2 seasons has to combat. And it is going to take everybody on the defense, not just Mike Ryan, not just Take Bennett. It's going to take the entire FBI, Federal Bureau of Interceptors, to take down Baltimore on the offense. Now, when it comes to defense, we saw this past week, London unable to get the job done over Baltimore when they had done it about half a year or so ago. We saw this past weekend, Josh, that Louisiana, more so nickels and dimes teams and marches down the field, kicks a field goal more times than not. We saw them put up 45 points. Now, regardless, that 7 of those points were, of course, on a Tank Bennett pick 6, and we might need 1 or 2 of those to help us out this week. But there is a whole lot of promise now in Louisiana because of what we were able to do versus one of the best defenses coming into the playoffs. And I talked about it on Netma a week or so ago. The highest ranked defense in terms of all of their categories combined was Charleston, was Louisiana and Charleston. So for us to do that against Charleston gives us a lot of hope and a lot of promise. Baltimore is a whole different kettle of fish. We are going to have to play perfect football. I've harped on it so many times for each and every team that I think has a shot to take down the Vultures. I thought London was that team. Unfortunately for the Knights, it wasn't. Now it is our turn. Now it is the Revolution's time to show everyone that we aren't just about field goals. We aren't maybe a hunky-dory team that came up with a revolutionary 2-back system, if you will. We have a great opportunity to shock the SFL and to shock the SFL world with what we do on Saturday. So the only question is now, and I quote Hall of Famer Matt Wilson, is the only way to find out is on the field.
Regardless of the accolades and regardless of how your season ends, I would like to congratulate Mike Ryan on an outstanding season. Tyler Falk, host of Netma, still running every day, aren't you?
Still running every day as much as I can be.
My goodness. You yeoman. Tyler Falk, thanks so much.
Thank you, Josh.
Plenty more crunch time coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. And joining us once again, SFL Insider, Louisiana Revs GM, and also the editor of Swamp Talk, which is currently on hiatus, Ross Napoli. Ross, how are you?
I'm doing well, Josh. Always good to be back with you, bud.
Always glad to have you back. I'm going to ask you about the Sfl Honors Ballot that's come out. Some of these are pretty significant in terms of locks. I think that Tom Pepper's your guy in terms of MVP. It gets a little murkier as you go down the ballot. Do you have any other locks? And do you have any other snubs, not only from you, but maybe from rumblings you've heard around the league since the ballots come out?
Well, I agree with you that that there are some very popular choices for the MVP. Obviously, I was the one who made the big push for Jess to be on that ballot for MVP for us some weeks ago. I still stand by the fact that I believe no one's been more valuable to the success of their team. So Jess is still my pick for MVP. I can't take anything away from guys like Tom Pepper, Jack Wigmore. There are some phenomenal seasons that happened this year. Obviously, there's plenty of people going for that MVP award that are still alive here playing for an SFL championship. So, obviously for MVP, that was pretty much a really strong ballot top to bottom. And anyone who walks away with that is going to be deserving. As far as slam dunks, I mean, in my mind, I do feel that Rookie of the Year should go to Brad Jones. I think that he has just had a phenomenal season. This has got to be the best rookie running back draft class in SFL history. So, to have the guys to come out and to be able to have the types of seasons that they did is definitely got to be just one of the tops in SFL history as far as the running back position. So, I would think that although, again, everyone on that rookie, offensive rookie of the year ballot is deserving, I think the automatic should be Brad Jones for that one. As far as snubs, I'm going to be a little bit of a homer here, and I'm going to say I am surprised with the season that Mike Ryan is not on Defensive Player of the Year. The guy had 11 interceptions. He had 11 consecutive games with interceptions. He's coming off of an all-star season last year. He's going to be a surefire all-star this year. And how he is not on that list of players for this community to try to vote him in for Defensive Player of the Year after that type of season, I think is the biggest snub of all. So that was the one that really shocked me out of everything.
I want to ask you, I want to float a theory by you. You tell me what you think, because I think this happened in one other category too, especially with Defensive Rookie of the Year, where Declan O'Rourke and Aaron Gooden both had really good seasons, but Declan O'Rourke and Aaron Gooden both being linebackers, they're not accumulating the stats, they're not doing the sexy stuff, and Louisiana having a reputation for being a very good defense, and obviously Mike Ryan a big part of that. You also have Rolliman Hood, who was pretty good, and I can almost put Tank Bennett up there as well. You look at Bennett's stats, 110 tackles on the season. I mean, the guy was up there. Did the success of your team as a whole cost Mike Ryan a chance to get on that ballot, either for Defensive Player of the Year or even MVP?
It's a possibility. I don't know exactly what the criteria is when the league chooses these guys. I also don't understand why every award doesn't have the same amount of choices to choose from. So, again, it's a league ballot that they go ahead and, you know, decipher whatever criteria that they want to use. And listen, stats are stats, right? You're going to have a boatload of guys that have very similar stats. But since the league is always very oriented amongst storylines and sort of the coming out of nowhere type thing, I understand that 11 interceptions did not lead the league. I believe he was one behind the league lead, Mike Ryan. But for 11 consecutive games, which is still being batted around, whether or not it's actually an SFL record. No one's been able to backtrack it yet. There's rumors that maybe there was something. It's really got to be looked into a little bit more. But just because it's even in the conversation, I think it's what's the most surprising snub. The success of the team could very well be, but, you know, if that is the case, then it would be even more shocking to see why Jess is up there for MVP. You know, he is a reigning special teams player of the year. I know the league has this thing about players cannot win more than one award. So that's a little tricky too, because if you put them on the ballot for more than one award, then they should be able to win more than one award. If you don't want them to be able to achieve more than one award, then the league should be picking which ballot they believe they belong on and which not. And I think it really hurts the chances of winning the other award. So, you know, I think it still needs to be cleaned up a little bit. I think a lot of people in the league do appreciate what the league does with these ballots, but there's got to be a little bit more clarity as to what the criteria is to get your name on those ballots, when it seems to be what looks like it's the reason why certain people make it, being setting records or setting things, is not the reason why others get on. So a little bit of clarity will be nice moving forward, but unfortunately the ballot is what it is, and the community is going to choose from there.
Hey, where are you running off to? We got plenty more crunch time coming up right after this. Welcome back to SFL Crunch Time. We're continuing our conversation with SFL insider Ross Napoli. Ross, I got to ask you about Logan Jack going to L.A. Obviously, a big finish in his last game as a Carolina Skyhawk. Going to be the GM of a team that already has a running back. The dicey situation. What can you tell us about Logan Jack going to L.A.?
Well, I think how that kind of transpired a little bit was that Logan Jack was looking for an opportunity such as being a GM. And there are existing relationships with some of the staff members over there, with Sully Richardson and Ray Colson. So I do believe that those relationships played a part into him getting that opportunity. They know that it's going to be a good fit, working well together. They've shared a locker room. They've shared a team before. So it was one of the reasons why they knew it would work out well to bring him in there and give the opportunity. The tricky part there was, obviously, LA had to know prior to bringing that move that the book was closing on Robert Johnson's time there. Now, I do know from speaking to people with the situation that Robert Johnson, in fact, has spoken with and committed to another team. That information is not out yet. Both parties want that to be kind of kept under wraps right now. So to honor the wishes of both parties, we're not going to disclose what that is. But at that moment, both sides already knew that Robert Johnson was moving on, and it kind of cleared the way for Logan Jack to come in and get the opportunity to be the new GM over in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles has gone through some front office staff in the last couple seasons. That's been well documented. In your opinion, what is the transition here going to make? How is it going to make a difference in terms of the familiarity? Obviously, that'll help. But is this something where he could be able to maybe spark a turnaround similar to what we saw in Tulsa or even Sioux Falls this past year?
Well, it could be. I mean, when these GMs change teams and when people go in and they have a familiarity with the front office, I think there's a like-mindedness to the recruiting process as well as what the coaching staff wants and how they're going to be able to make that work with the roster. And this is going to be a very unique situation, across the league, because for Logan Jack to move on and get that new opportunity, it also begs the question of, so now Carolina's got a hole at the running back position. So clearly they're going to need to be doing stuff as well to fill those holes. We know that 4 expansion teams are going to be awarded in just a couple of weeks. And obviously those expansion teams behind the scenes have been working real hard to get rosters committed so that should they be awarded the teams, that they're kind of hitting the ground running. So this is going to be a very good offseason, and it's an exciting time for people like Logan Jack to get into that opportunity and for the GMs and the front offices of the new franchises, because there's no real new people to those positions, right? The people who are going to be GMs, the people who are going to go over to coach these new teams, they're coming from other teams. So we're going to have major holes in a bunch of rosters across this league. And I think it's really going to bring some parity to the SFL this offseason, because it's not like you have 4 new teams that are going to be coming in and they have to start from scratch and they're going to be loaded with minors players. People knew through the bidding process who the staffs were going to be on these teams and the type of ability they were going to have to attract people to the rosters should their franchises be awarded the expansion teams. So there are some real exciting names out there that are going to be switching teams. I have spoken to a couple of people in regards to who they had committed to their teams should they get the teams. And this community is going to be pretty exciting to see exactly who parts with certain teams and gets on with these expansion teams should the franchises that have these guys committed to them be awarded the team. So guys like Logan Jack and the new GMs and people who are shifting around and moving, there's, you see this new GM in Queen City, right? BJ Loveless has stepped down in his pursuit of a team, and if they don't get awarded with it, who knows what his future is going to be. But Tom Rydell is now over in Queen City as the GM. We just mentioned Logan Jack. There are teams that are going to start building their rosters in a new way. Because when new guys come in and some teams need some fresh starts, we could see some, I don't want to say odd pairings, but we could see some signings to certain teams that people may kind of raise an eyebrow and say, didn't think that they'd be going in that direction.
That's very exciting. A lot of off seasons, as you said, developing right here. Ross, your off season has not started yet. You guys are still in this thing. Big semifinal matchup coming up against Baltimore. What do you see against this Vultures team? To me, I see a deep team with no weaknesses that has the potential to trample everybody else on their way to another SFL title. What do you see?
I see who I believe is the best team in the SFL. So if the Louisiana Revolution are going to get to a title and win a title, I believe this is the week that they're going to have to go through it. It is not a knock on Vancouver. I just believe that Baltimore is the best well-rounded team in the SFL. They're defending champions, and they just go week in and week out, and they do it. They do it as a complete team in every phase of the game. Their return game is excellent. Their passing game is excellent. Their run game, since Warren Murray has been there, has totally taken a step up. And that's not a knock on Jimmy Hazard, because Jimmy Hazard was an excellent minors running back who was a solid player for them. But when you could bring in a veteran like Warren Murray and you see what he's done in these couple of months that he's been there right now, to go along with that defense, Baltimore is a top-notch team, and it's going to be the biggest test, I think, for our team moving forward. And if we can go ahead and pass Baltimore this week, I think we have an excellent shot to win an SFL championship. Baltimore is just, hats off to them for everything that they that they do. So we're excited about it, and we really feel that this has been a tough road, but there's going to be no question. As far as the Revolution, if we come out on top, no one's going to be able to question whether or not we were the best team in the SFL. We just had to go through Charleston, one of the best defenses in the league, who was a division winner. We're going to go ahead and, like I said, who I believe is the best team in the SFL right now in Baltimore. And if we go ahead and do that and face either of the other two on the other side and win that, no one's going to be able to sit there and say, well, if they only played this team, maybe it would have been different. The 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds are the last ones left. So anybody who comes out on top, they beat the best of the best this year to win that championship.
Louisiana Revolution's GM, Ross Napoli. Ross, thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh.
We've given just about all the crunch time we have to give, but we still have game balls coming up. The exciting conclusion of crunch time right after this. The SFL semifinal doubleheader starts Saturday, May 7th. The Lone Star Glory head north of the border to face the Vancouver Legion. Vancouver has not lost at home this season and have won the last 4 matchups against the Glory, but Lone Star has defied expectations all season long, thanks to inspired ball carrying from Ike McBride and a potent defense that managed 32 takeaways in the regular season. Kickoff for Lone Star Vancouver is scheduled for 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And then the Louisiana Revolution heads into Sports Gamers Online Stadium to face the defending SFL champions, the Baltimore Vultures. Can the scrappy ballers from the Bayou pull off the mother of all upsets on Sim Football's biggest stage? Baltimore also puts their undefeated home streak on the line, with the winner earning the right to play for the SFL Season 18 Championship. It all starts Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back. Crunch time. We're putting a bow on it. Game balls. We got a couple game balls to give out here. For the quarterfinal round, let's start with the Baltimore secondary. An exemplary unit. They don't always get the attention they deserve because the offense is so good, but they were not just good this past weekend. They were great. London's secondary scored 2 touchdowns, but Baltimore's secondary also scored 2 touchdowns. Pick sixes from Marvin Himes and Alvin Mack, 6 interceptions in total. 2 of those came from Enzo Bolt. Troy Loshaw, Elijah Warfield also came up with clutch takeaways. And this was a game that was closer than the score might have suggested. Baltimore did jump out to an early lead. London was on the verge of coming back before that secondary stepped up and managed to put things away. Props to the Baltimore secondary. You have 1 game ball to split between the 5 or 6 of you. Good luck with that. I hope you have a sharp knife. Also getting a game ball, keep that knife out, because I'm giving one to the entire Louisiana backfield of Randy Squarebush, Colin Hart, and Cameron Collier. I apologize for calling you Cameron Collier earlier in the season, but it fits so well with the whole Bayou Cajun thing. I just had to roll with it. 174 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns combined for this group, and they were magnificent, and they had to be based on the game plan. They rushed the ball 31 times compared to just 19 passes from Tommy Utah, and this was the effort that got them over the hump. They knew that Charleston was going to be a good defense. They were going to come out and show them something different than what they saw in the earlier meeting, which Charleston did not score a touchdown, and neither did Louisiana for that matter. And Louisiana took the fight to them. 31 carries among 3 different guys. It's a strategy that's worked for them so far this season. We'll see if it works against Baltimore. But Louisiana backfield, you 3 get my second game ball.
And that is going to do it for this edition of Crunch Time. It's been an exciting week here in the playoffs. Next week, semifinal recap, and we preview Season 18, the SFL Championship. Who's in, who's out, who's going to take that title. It's going to be very exciting. So we'll see you all next time for that. He's Josh Circle. I forgot who you were.
That's all right. I mean, it happens. Don't worry about it. I'm forgettable.
And I'm a little overweight. He's Josh Zirkle. I'm Ethan Muslin. Keep on crunching.
Bye, Ethan. I hit the wrong button again. So